While I was lying in a hospital bed, terrified because I couldn't feel my legs, my husband was busy planning a new life with another woman. He was crying by my bedside, telling me we couldn't afford the treatment, that we were drowning in debt. But he never expected that I'd be the one to destroy his future. He didn't know I had already found the key to his secret apartment. Let me take you back to when I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. I met Rohan 3 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but he had this quiet confidence that just pulled me in. We talked for hours that night about life, about struggles, about how hard it is to make it in this city. He told me he worked a modest job in IT support, that he didn't have much, but he had a big heart. And honestly, that's all I wanted. I didn't care about money. I wanted someone loyal. We got married 6 months later. It was a small ceremony, mostly because Rohan insisted we couldn't afford anything big. I remember holding his hand at the altar, looking into his eyes, and thinking, we'll build everything together from scratch. But looking back now, the red flags were there from the very first week. You know that feeling in your gut when something just feels off? Rohan was obsessed with saving money. And I don't mean, let's not eat out every night kind of saving. I mean, he controlled every single rupee. If I bought a coffee on my way to work, he'd ask to see the receipt. He'd sigh and say, we have to be careful, honey, the rent is due soon. He made me feel guilty for wanting the basics. I was working full-time as a graphic designer, making decent money, but he insisted we put everything into a joint account that he managed. He said he was better with numbers. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. There were other things, too. He was incredibly secretive with his phone. If I walked into the room while he was on a call, he'd lower his voice or hang up immediately. When I asked who it was always just work or the bank. And the late nights. Oh, the late nights. He said he was picking up extra shifts, doing freelance repairs, anything to help us scrape by. I'd sit at home, eating dinner alone, feeling so proud of him for working so hard for us. I was such a fool. The cracks started to show on a Tuesday. I remember it clearly because it was our anniversary, and Rohan had called to say he wouldn't be home until midnight. Over time, he said, I'm sorry, babe, I'm doing this for us. I decided to surprise him. I thought, if he's working so hard, I'll bring him dinner at his office. I'd never actually been inside his building because, he said, security was strict, but I figured I could wait in the lobby. I drove down there, food in hand. When I got to the front desk, I asked for Rohan. The security guard looked at me, confused. He typed the name into the system and shook his head. Ma'am, nobody named Rohan works here. We don't even have an IT support department on this floor. This is a law firm. My stomach dropped. I tried to laugh it off, saying I must have the wrong building, but my hands were shaking as I walked back to the car. I called him. He didn't pick up. I went home and waited. When he finally walked in at 1 a.m., looking exhausted, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know what was happening. While he was in the shower, I did something I promised I'd never do. I went through his wallet. I wasn't looking for anything specific, maybe just a receipt that showed where he had eaten dinner, but I found something much worse. Tucked behind his credit card was a key. It looked brand new, and wrapped around it was a small piece of paper with an address written on it, an address in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it over the running water. I took a picture of the address and put the key back exactly how I found it. The next day, I called in sick to work. As soon as Rohan left wearing his work clothes meant for a low-paying job, I followed him. He didn't go to an office. He drove straight to that address I found. I watched from my car as he parked his beat-up sedan around the corner, walked into this luxury apartment complex, and was greeted by the doorman like he owned the place. I waited for an hour. Then, I walked in. I told the doorman I was Rohan's wife and I had forgotten my key. I expected him to stop me, but he smiled and said, "Of course, Mrs. Sharma. Go right up. Penthouse B." Mrs. Sharma? That wasn't my last name. I went up. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, I wasn't in a hallway. I was in a living room, a massive, beautiful living room with floor-to-ceiling windows. And there was Rohan. He wasn't wearing his old t-shirt. He was in a tailored suit, laughing on the phone, holding a glass of expensive scotch. laughing on the phone, holding a glass of expensive scotch. And then I saw her, a woman, younger than me, walking out of the bedroom in a silk robe. She walked up to him and kissed him on the cheek. I stood there, hidden behind the entryway pillar, freezing cold. He wasn't broke. He wasn't struggling. He was rich. He had been hiding money, my money, our money, to fund a double life with a mistress in a luxury penthouse, while I was clipping coupons and eating instant noodles. That's when I decided I wouldn't be his victim. I didn't scream. I didn't storm in. I quietly pressed the button for the elevator and left. The drive home was silent. I didn't cry. I was past sadness. I was in a state of cold, hard rage. He wanted to play games? Fine. I was going to win. I knew I couldn't just leave. If I left now, he'd hide the assets. He'd claim he was broke. He'd leave me with nothing but the debt he had likely racked up in my name. I needed a plan. First, I went to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a forensic accountant who specialized in divorce. I told him everything. When we started digging, the reality was worse than I thought. Rohan wasn't just hiding his own income. He was siphoning money from my salary into a shell company he claimed was for investments. He had stolen nearly half of my savings. But here's the twist, the one thing he lied about that hurt the most. Remember how he said we couldn't have kids because I had fertility issues? He made me go to doctors, take tests, feel broken as a woman. It turned out he had a vasectomy years ago. He let me believe I was the problem, so I wouldn't push for a family he didn't want with me. That was the fuel I needed. For the next 3 months, I played the perfect, submissive wife. I cooked his meals. I nodded when he complained about money. I even apologized for spending too much on groceries. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. I put a recording app on his phone when he was asleep. I got screenshots of his bank transfers. I took photos of the penthouse lease, which was conveniently in his mother's name to hide it from me. I also started protecting myself. I opened a separate bank account he didn't know about. I started moving small amounts of cash there. I secretly interviewed for a new job in a different city, one that paid double what I was making. And I got it. The hardest part was acting like I still loved him. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled. But I had to wait for the perfect moment to drop the bomb. And that moment was his 35th birthday party. He wanted a small gathering at our humble apartment to keep up the charade, but his parents, who were in on the secret, insisted on a big dinner at a fancy restaurant. He couldn't say no to them. It was going to be him, me, his family, and his boss, who was actually his business partner in the shell company. The night of the dinner arrived. I wore a red dress, a dress he hated because he said it was too much. I felt powerful. We were all seated at this long table. Everyone was toasting to Rohan, talking about what a hard-working, humble man he was. His mistress wasn't there, obviously, but I knew she was texting him because his phone kept buzzing on the table. When it was time for the speeches, I stood up. I tapped my glass with a spoon. The room went quiet. Rohan looked at me nervously. He hated when I spoke in public. I just want to say a few words about my husband. I started, smiling sweetly. Rohan is a man of many talents. He's a hard worker, a saver, but mostly, he's a storyteller. I pulled out a thick envelope from my purse. Rohan tells stories about being broke. I continued, my voice steady. He tells stories about working late. He even tells stories about medical conditions. I opened the envelope and pulled out the photos. I slid them down the table. Photos of the penthouse. Photos of him with the mistress. Bank statements showing the millions he had, and the transfers from my account to his. The medical report proving his vasectomy. I found the penthouse, Rohan, I said, looking him dead in the eye. And I found the money you stole from me. The silence was deafening. His mother gasped. His business partner looked away. Rohan's face went from pale to purple. What is this? He stammered, trying to grab the photos. She's crazy. She's making this up. I'm not, I said calmly. And neither is the lawyer who just served you divorce papers at the penthouse. Oh, and your company? I sent these documents to the IRS this morning. Turns out, hiding assets is illegal. Rohan stood up, knocking his chair over. You ungrateful! After everything I did for you, you did nothing for me. I cut him off. You used me. You lied to me. And now, you're going to lose everything. I didn't stay to watch him beg. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high. I heard later that his business partner fired him on the spot to save his own skin. The IRS froze his accounts within the week. He lost the penthouse because he couldn't pay the rent without the illicit funds. That was 6 months ago. The divorce is almost final. Because of the evidence I gathered, I got every penny he stole back, plus damages for emotional distress. My life now is peaceful. I have my own apartment, one that I pay for, one that feels like home. I took that new job in the new city. I'm in therapy, learning to trust again, learning that I am not broken. Rohan tried to call me a few times, crying, saying he's living in a motel, that the mistress left him when the money ran out. I blocked his number. I don't care. Revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about finally choosing myself. It was about proving that I am not just a side character in his story. I am the protagonist of mine. So, I have to ask you guys, do you think I went too far by exposing him in front of his family and the IRS? Or did he deserve even more for what he did? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below. If you want to see more stories where karma finally hits back, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the next one.